Good evening. Good to see everyone this evening. We're in the book of Daniel, continuing. We're on chapter 4. This is the lesser known dream of Nebuchadnezzar. We're very familiar with the other one that he made such a big deal about. You got to just tell me. You got to tell me what I dreamed, and you got to tell me what it means. That's what he said in regard to the one in chapter 2. But now we're in chapter 4, and chapter 4 starts out in an interesting way. I want you please to notice this. It appears to me and others that Daniel merely wrote down the record of the words that Nebuchadnezzar himself said. So it looks like Nebuchadnezzar is the one that tells what happened. It's after the fact. And we can tell that by the way he starts the chapter, and then he goes into the difficulties that went on, and then the resolution of the difficulties, and how all that ended. And the end and the beginning of this chapter sound very similar to one another. The middle, not so much. The Assyrian and Babylonian kings regarded themselves as kings of all the earth, and in their inscriptions were accustomed thus to speak of themselves. Now, I want you to notice what he says in verse 1. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. Now, if you want to do an interesting little short research project in the book of Daniel, you want to see how many times that expression is used, because it's used numerous times in the book. To all peoples, nations, and languages in the earth. That is, they portrayed themselves as being over the entire earth. And they were over a good portion of it, being fair about it, historically speaking, but not really the whole earth. It's just the way they portrayed themselves. So he goes ahead and says, I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. Signs were extraordinary events. Wonders described the effect on the people. So you've got the extraordinary event that happens, and then people wonder at it. We'd say they're awed by it. Something along that order. That's what he's talking about. And then he says, how great are his signs and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. No other king that ever was on the earth could make this statement, that my kingdom survives from generation to generation to generation. It never stops. Nebuchadnezzar didn't always think that. But by the time he gets through what happens in this chapter, he thinks it. He's got to figure it out, at least that much. Now, was he converted? I don't know the answer to that question. Did he come to fully believe in God? The end of the chapter makes you wonder. It's possible that he did, but whether he actually did or not, I cannot answer it. Young, in his commentary, thinks this edict was prepared under Daniel's influence and has therefore quite some theocratic coloring. So, in other words, Young's saying, I'm not so sure that Nebuchadnezzar wrote this by himself. Daniel was kind of like his speechwriter. That's the way we would say it today, that Daniel did the writing. Well, that may be true because it does have theocratic emphasis, theos. You see, that's really a Greek word, not Hebrew, and it means God. So theocratic is totally unlike democratic. In democratic system, all the people get to vote. In a theocratic system, God's in charge. Now, it's significant that Nebuchadnezzar would write as he does because the people of Israel themselves didn't believe this. They didn't accept the rule of God. Do you remember? If you go back to 1 Samuel chapter 8, that there comes a time when there's a problem. Samuel's getting to be an old man. His sons are not anywhere near what they ought to be. Even, by the way, Samuel doesn't think so. And the people reject his sons as Daniel gets old. And what do? Well, look at chapter 8, verse 1 of 1 Samuel. Now it came to pass when Samuel was old that he made his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second, Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not walk in his ways. They turned aside after dishonest gain, took bribes, and perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah and said to him, "Look, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations." Well, of course, really, Samuel takes this as a personal attack. They've rejected me. And he's very, very displeased. Verse 6, notice verse 7. And the Lord said to Samuel, "Heed the voice of the people and all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me, that I should not reign over them." It is most interesting when you take that incident and couple it with the book of Judges, which basically, in terms of a chronological timeline, will be right before this. And you'll see multiple times in the book of Judges, in those days there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes. You see the problem. That carries over now with Samuel being the judge at that particular point in time. Carries over to his day, and they reject the leader. They reject Samuel, but God says, no. They're rejecting me. And in point of fact, he goes back, God does, and says, they've been doing this forever. This has been going on ever since we left Egypt. You know, even in Egypt, they had problems with what God had to say. So nothing really new here. Any questions or comments? This is setting the stage. Again, I think first 3 verses are what he says at the end of everything that happens, not the beginning. Although it's in the beginning of what he writes here. Okay, let's pick up verse 4 then of Daniel chapter 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts on my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore I issued a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers came in. And I told them the dream, but they did not make known to me its interpretation. But at last Daniel came before me. His name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God. In him is the spirit of the holy God. And I told him the dream, or told the dream before him, saying. So now he's beginning to explain, how did I arrive at the point in time where I would say, everybody honor Daniel's God? How did he get there? He certainly wasn't there in chapter 3, was he? When he cast, remember, the 3 young men into the fiery furnace? No, he wasn't there then, but all of a sudden, chapter 4, he is. Now, how much time elapsed between the two? I don't know. No way to know that. But I know God's about to make a singular impression on King Nebuchadnezzar. Notice, the king was at rest, which literally means he was free from all care. What an interesting way to put that. Nothing's bothering me. And then he was also flourishing. Think there about growing green, prosperous. Think about, new crops and things like that. He's portraying himself that way. He's like a field, just bursting forth with all kinds of glorious growth. That's the way he portrays himself. But he has this dream, and notice the dream troubled him. Literally made me afraid. It indicates the king's whole being was agitated. The word is stronger than the word translated terrified. And by the way, that's in the old King James, because Young wrote his commentary in that era. So he in New King James is troubled, and that's even, to me, milder than terrified. But Young says, no, this word's stronger than terrified. This dream has, what do we say sometimes? Well, it scared me to death. That's kind of what he's saying. It's just really, really disturbing. Young goes on to say, the king recognized that the God of Daniel was different from his own gods. The thought is, that which is truly God is found within Daniel. The epithet holy does not here have reference to moral purity, but is rather roughly equivalent to our word divine. That's a little bit difficult for us. We got to think, where are we in history? Who's doing the talking here? And again, I want you to remember, this section of the book of Daniel is all in Aramaic. So that tells me something very, very important. It's very possible that Nebuchadnezzar at least had it written, because it's his language. It's not the language Daniel will later use when he gets on into chapter 8. All of a sudden he's going to shift back to Hebrew, because from 8 on is written to the Hebrew people, not really encompassing what goes on in Babylon and the Aramaic speaking people. Anybody have any questions thus far? Or thoughts? Oh. Okay, let's go ahead and look at start at verse 9 and listen to what it says. Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the Spirit of the Holy God is in you, and no secret troubles you. Explain to me the visions of my dream that I have seen and its interpretation. These were the visions of my head while on my bed. I was looking, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew and became strong. Its height reached to the heavens, and it could be seen to the ends of all the earth. Its leaves were lovely, its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The beasts of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the heavens dwelt in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. I saw in the visions of my head while on my bed, and there was a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven. Okay, so he begins with, I saw this tree, and the way he pictures it, it's kind of in the center of the earth. It just dominates everything. It's got branches that reach out, and remember how he thinks about himself. Peoples, nations, all of you, listen to me. That's the way he thought. So as you view this tree, this is a pretty good representation of the way Nebuchadnezzar thought about himself. That he's central, that he's dominant, that everybody's under him. And you can see it in the dream. It follows right along. All the birds, all the animals. The birds, all make their nests in this tree. The animals all come underneath it and feed under it. I already see it. Chris Bates is trying to find out how he can get that tree where he hunts deer. See, all of them feed right there. That's where they are in this image that he's seen. The verbs here indicate not a fixed state, but rather a state of becoming. It's not that it is already there, but it's going there. The tree is growing to encompass the earth. The tree is taken care of over time. All the birds of heaven, all the animals are going to feed there. It has a height that reaches up and out. So, just, I don't know. What I think of when I read this is, well, to some extent, it's the General Sherman tree in the redwood forest in California. The General Sherman, at least at one time, was the biggest plant living on the face of the earth. It's a monster tree. So big that I don't know how many of us it'd take to reach around it. They won't let you walk up to it, by the way, so that's going to be irrelevant. We can't test that. But it's just huge. I remember my sister still has a copy of a picture, because in the days when we went, I remember I'm old, so when we went there, we all joined hands. I took my dad's hand, and then took Laura's hand, and Laura took Lisa's hand, and Lisa held the hand of her stuffed monkey that she liked to play with, and then my mom held the hand of the monkey, and we couldn't even reach around half the tree. That's how big the thing was. So imagine this tree, but it's in its circumference, it's huge this way, but now it also reminds you of what? So it reminds you of the other redwoods that are in California. And those are the ones that skyrocket. They're so big, so tall. That's what he's seeing as he looks at this. And it's, in some ways, it's not that amazing that he would be terrified, beyond terrified, because he doesn't know what to think of this. He's feeding, giving shade, giving shelter to the beasts and the birds, and then a watcher. That's difficult translation. Probably the best way to translate would be a constantly vigilant one. Someone that is constantly watching. And he came down from heaven. Does this remind you of any passages of Scripture? Not the story, the watcher idea. Constantly vigilant. Think of anything? What? Ezekiel. Okay, Ezekiel's got, he's called the watchman. But expand beyond that. What about from heaven? Not Ezekiel on earth, but from heaven. That's where the watcher comes from, right? He comes down. So, any passages? Come on, Drew, you teach Ecclesiastes. More than a month ago. Okay, look at the end of Ecclesiastes, everybody, and see what he says there, because it fits the description that's given here. It fits very, very well as we look at it. He comes to his conclusion, and verse 13 and 14 of chapter 12, he says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. Is he a watcher? Sounds to me like that he is. What about 2 Corinthians? 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Not quite expressing that watcher aspect, and yet when you see what he does, then you'd say, well, maybe to some extent. Verse 10, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. Everything you've done, you're going to be weighed on that. Okay, look at the book of Hebrews. Hebrews chapter 4. And here we come again. The writer's talking about things a lot like this, and we're very familiar with this. Verse 12, for the word of God is living and powerful and sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing even the division of soul and spirit and of joints and marrow, and is a discerner of the thoughts and intents of the heart. And there is no creature hidden from his sight, but all things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give account. Who's the watcher? Well, honestly, at this moment, we don't know. But I can tell you who it sounds like. It sounds like God. It sounds like God's coming down. And again, we've almost got something we've talked about recently in other classes, and that is we've almost got this thing, God's going to come down and see this great thing. It's not really that great because he got to come down to see it. So the watcher is coming. The constantly vigilant one is coming from heaven. Okay, pick up at verse 14 then. And he cried aloud and said thus, chop down the tree and cut off its branches. Strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the beasts get out from under it and the birds from its branches. Nevertheless, leave the stump and roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze. In the tender grass of the field, let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beasts on the grass of the earth. Let his heart be changed from that of a man. Please, if you underline in your Bible, consider underlining heart. And you'll see why when we get deeper on into the chapter. Very, very important little tie-in here that we're going to see. Okay, the tree then is going to be stripped of its former glory. Some of you have been talking about the same thing I'm talking about. Man, you're driving down Interstate 55, headed toward the retreat. Man, beautiful, beautiful trees. I mean, the median's just full of down trees. They've all just been chopped down. They tell me that statewide we've got not only the drought, we've got a beetle infestation of some sort. Some of the glory's gone. Some of the beautiful forests of Mississippi are hurting real bad right now. Oh, we still got trees. But, just think about, all those trees in the middle of the road. It's a tragedy. You used to drive down through those beautiful, beautiful trees, all gone. This tree's done the same way. Cut it down. Take everything apart. Kyle sees the fetters now. They put fetters around it, around the stump. He sees the fetters figuratively or spiritually of the withdrawal of free self-determination through the fetter of madness. Nebuchadnezzar is going to lose his free will. You think you're in charge? I'm getting ready to show you who is in charge. That's the point, I think, as we look at this, that is being made. Young says the crowning glory of the king, his reason, will be taken from him, and he will become like an irrational creature, a lower animal. Okay, notice he loses his heart. Now skip down to verse 34. Same chapter. And at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. Lost his heart, but he got his understanding back. Look at verse 36. At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my honor and splendor returned to me. So his heart is equal to his understanding, is equal to his reason. So what's his heart? It's his mind. He's going to lose his mind. We're going to take away his thinking that is of human form, and we're going to give him the heart of, the mind of an animal. And when you start thinking about that, animals don't have free will in the sense that we do. Now we talk about free range out west, where it used to be at least cattle could roam without any fences impeding them. You think about that and say, well, they're free. Well, yeah, in a sense, but they don't get to make choices, do they? Not really. Just as long as they get food and water, that's pretty much all they care about. And Nebuchadnezzar is going to go from being the ruler of all the world, that's his own perspective. He's going to go from being ruler of the whole world to being an animal. No choice is going to be made at all. So what an interesting thing for this to say. And then he says, and let 7 times pass over him. This decision is by the decree of the watchers, in order that the living may know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he will and sets over it the lowest of men. Now, again, don't know what you do with your Bible, but the key expression in the entire chapter is what we just read, that the Most High rules in the kingdom of man. But before we get there, he says 7 times. In the Aramaic, the word means a fixed and definite period. So how long is it? That's my answer, and I'm sticking to it. We don't know. Could it be 7 days? Well, I guess it could. Could be 7 weeks, I suppose. Could be 7 months. Well, I guess. Could be 7 years. Well, there's nothing really that I can pin down and say this is a limit to it. It's either this short or this long. I don't know. All I know is it lasts long enough that it does its job. I do know that. It does the exact work that God meant for it to do. And that's pretty much all that I can say. Now, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of all of this? Well, we've seen it in verse 17. Turn over now. Stay in the same chapter. And in my Bible, I've highlighted, so that I pick up on all this. Verse 25. They shall drive you from men. Your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of man and gives it to whomever he chooses. Watch verse 26. Inasmuch as they gave the command to leave the stump and the roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be assured to you after you come to know that heaven rules. I think that's the abbreviated way of saying it. Heaven rules. Not man. No man's rules. Just God. Then go on down. Same chapter. Keep rolling along there. And now we want to look at verse 32. And they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make you eat grass like oxen, and 7 times shall pass over you until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of man and gives it to whomever he chooses. And then you go on down from there and look at 34, the last part of the verse, and then on down. I blessed the Most High and praised and honored him who lives forever, for his dominion is an everlasting dominion. His kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven and among the inhabitants of the earth. No one can restrain his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At the same time, my reason returned to me, for the glory of my kingdom and my honor and splendor returned to me. My counselors and nobles restored to me, and I was restored to my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all of whose works are truth and his ways justice, and those who walk in pride he is able to put down. Did he come to understand God rules in the kingdom of man? Okay, pick up on this. He says God rules in the kingdom of man. Is that singular or plural? It's singular. Kingdom. Now, if you and I were asked the question, I tried to find this out a short while back. Here's the best I could come up with. It's probably not right because things keep changing all the time on the face of the earth. But I asked somebody, how many nations are there on the face of the earth? And it was somewhere beyond 131. We would say the kingdoms of men, wouldn't we? Because you got the United Kingdom, you got the United States of America, you got Russia, you got China, you got North Korea and South Korea, and well, there's no North and South Vietnam anymore, is there? It's all one. But anyway, you got all those different nations. So each one of them is a king. And some of them call themselves a kingdom. You know, Saudi Arabia is supposed to be a kingdom, right? But when God comes along, he says through his prophet and through this dream, God rules in the kingdom of men. There's only one kingdom. And guess who's king? God. God rules in the kingdom of man. And I'm going to keep saying this. This book almost forces me to, but I'm going to keep talking about it, brethren. We got to quit acting like men on earth have control. They don't. Not in the final analysis. They don't have control. Now, can they hurt you? Yep. Hurt the Lord, didn't they? Hung him on a cross. Yeah, they can hurt you. But can they defeat the one that rules? Mm-mm. No. Never. And that's important, so important for us to realize. Look at Romans chapter 13, please. We might think, well, this is Old Testament, and, you know, it's different. Well, not really. God is consistent in the Old and the New Testament. One of the most important passages to remember when you're talking to people about the Bible, and they want to throw at you that the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament are not the same. Because of the difference in the way they act and react. Not at all. Because in Hebrews chapter 13, the writer specifically says, Jesus Christ, the same yesterday, today, and forever. He doesn't change. He's always the same. So look, New Testament, Romans 13, beginning at verse 1. Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities. For there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists the authority resists the ordinance of God. And those who resist will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to evil. Do you want to be unafraid of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For he is God's minister and avenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore, you must be subject not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this, you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. Render therefore to all their due. Taxes to whom taxes are due, customs to whom customs, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. You do remember when they asked Jesus, do you pay tax to Caesar? Remember his reaction? Bring me a coin. They brought him one. And he said, whose image is this on here? And they said, Caesar's. And what did he say? Render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, and unto God that which is God's. By the way, what does that last part mean? You look again at Genesis chapter 1. Let us make man in our image. What do I owe God? Me. What do you owe God? Same thing, but you say me for yourself. I got to say it for me, but you say it for yourself. We all owe ourselves to God. We bear his image. Now, that's not in the sense that, Bill and I look the same. He's obviously more buff than I am. Probably could pick up some things I wouldn't even dream of picking up. There's a difference between the two of us, but we're both in the image of God. In what sense? God's a spirit. Do you have a spirit? Yeah. Do I? So we're both made in the image of God, aren't we? But the authorities, the governing authorities, who puts them in power? God does. And I'm going to be honest with you. I'm almost like Habakkuk at times. I'll admit it. When God tells Habakkuk, don't worry about it. I'm going to take care of all the problems of Judah. I'm sending the Babylonians. It'd be almost like saying, I'm sending the Chinese to take care of the United States. And he may do that, by the way. I don't know. I'm not in charge. I'm not going to try to be. I might say, you might say, well, those folks are atheists. They don't believe in you at all. And I think I know the next answer. If the world's going to keep standing, don't worry about it. I got that taken care of too. Somebody's going to beat China. And you can keep going down the line. Because why? Because God rules in the kingdom of men. That's why. Some of you have heard me tell this before, but if you have, forgive me. But my dad became well acquainted with a gospel preacher by the name of George Tin. He was Chinese. Our brother Tin was not always a brother. He didn't believe in God, but he was a translator for certain preachers who went to China, and he learned the truth and obeyed the gospel. Tin ended up coming to the United States. He got a Bible education and started preaching. And here is what Brother Tin said. God sent Mao Zedong to China. And if you know your history, you're thinking, you kidding, right? Mao Zedong? The guy killed or had a lot of people killed. Here's what Brother Tin said. He said, before Mao Zedong, China had almost as many languages as they had cities, towns. You could not go from Byram to Florence and speak to where anybody could understand you. You couldn't go from Florence to Richland. They wouldn't understand you over there either. And just keep on going. Name all the places you want to name. They had thousands of different dialects within China. Mao Zedong comes along. What's the first thing he dictates? Everybody in this big nation that covers vast square miles, everybody's got to learn Mandarin Chinese. Okay? No, everybody's got to know. You can have your own dialect, but you got to know Mandarin Chinese. Number two, he said, I want to be able to talk to everybody. So everybody's got to have a radio so that I can talk to them every day if I want to talk to them. So they did that. Number three, he outlawed ancestor worship. It's going to be difficult to convert somebody who's bound by ancestor worship. But Mao Zedong outlawed it. You couldn't worship your ancestors anymore. And guess what happened? Built a giant antenna in Alaska. I've been to see that thing. So it's don't look like any antenna I ever saw in my life before, I can tell you. Looks a whole lot more like the net that they pull up when you're going to kick a field goal. It looks like that. But it's huge, just huge, spread out there. Of course, made of metal, different things. And George Tin spoke in Mandarin Chinese and delivered the gospel over Mao Zedong's radios to people who no longer had anything to worship. Did God put Mao Zedong in power? I can't prove it, but I'll tell you what. I got a sneaky suspicion he did, because everybody that rules is from God. Important. Got to remember it. Verse 18. Let's pick up again. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, declare its interpretation, since all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation. But you are able, for the Spirit of the Holy God is in you. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for a time, and his thoughts troubled him. So the king spoke and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation trouble you. Belteshazzar answered and said, My Lord, may this dream concern those who hate you, its interpretation concern your enemies. The tree that you saw, which grew and became strong, whose height reached to the heavens, and which could be seen by all the earth, whose leaves were lovely and its fruit abundant, in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and in whose branches the birds of the heaven had their home. It is you, O king, who have grown and become strong, for your greatness has grown and reached to the heavens, and your dominion to the end of the earth. Inasmuch as the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven, saying, Chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave its stump and roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze. In the tender grass of the field, let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beasts of the field till 7 times pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king. They shall drive you from men, your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. And inasmuch as they gave the command to leave the stump and roots of the tree, your kingdom shall be assured to you, after you come to know that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity. Nebuchadnezzar was not as receptive as Pharaoh was to Joseph. Maybe he started off pretty good. Maybe Nebuchadnezzar is a representation of you and me. You ever say, I'm resolved, I'm not going to do, you name whatever it is, not going to do that again. How long do you make it? Well, a lot of us don't make it past the first week, I can tell you that, depending on what it is. So he starts off pretty good, but then all this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of the 12 months, he was walking about the royal palace of Babylon. By the way, by this time, Babylon is so dominant, they're through fighting wars. For the time being, they're going to end up fighting again. But right now, they're not fighting any wars. That's why I could say he's at rest. So what did Nebuchadnezzar take pride in when he quit winning battles? He loved to build things. You ever heard of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon? They were one of the 7 wonders of the world. And he built them. And he built all kinds of buildings and things like that. And so it says, the king spoke, saying, Is not this great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty? While the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice fell from heaven, King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you. And they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make you eat grass like oxen, and 7 times shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of man and gives it to whomever he chooses. That very hour, the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from men and ate grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. We already read the end of the story. Think about a few things. Historically speaking, is there any evidence that this ever happened? And it used to be that the liberal theologians said no. And no, it's not there. But here's what happened. If there is actually a record, and the record is found in the writings of a historian, and it says that for a period of time, evil Marduk ruled. And his father kind of just disappears from the scene for a period of time. And then he's back again. Now, evil Marduk, by the way, after Nebuchadnezzar's death, will be the next ruler in the land of Babylon. But why when Nebuchadnezzar's alive? Well, my suspicion is that is the period that we're talking about right here. Recognizing the true source of his help, the king lifted his eyes heavenward. You may remember Lot lifted his eyes and saw the Jordan Valley, same expression. No one can oppose God's actions. We've already seen that to some extent. Nebuchadnezzar thus recognized the humiliation which he had experienced as a righteous punishment for his pride, without, however, being mindful of the divine grace which had been shown in mercy toward him. That's Kyle's conclusion, and I think he's probably right. Next week, chapter 5, and what I want you to try to do is historically find out what did they do in history at that point in time that involved just a hand. Next week you'll find out. Thank you.